Welcome to the first introductory video about CBT. I'm glad you enrolled in this class. CBT is one of my favorite interventions in psychotherapy. I passionately and strongly believe in the rationale of a cognitive approach to psychotherapy. So it is my hope that you will come to share my passion for CBT throughout this semester. So I want you to pause this lecture video and then go to the video right below this lecture to watch Dr. Aaron Beck talking about his experience of developing CBT around 1960s when psychoanalytics is the only prominent form of psychotherapy. So I hope you enjoyed the video. So as you saw in the video, in 1960s, when most people believed in the hypothesis of depression based on the idea of inverted hostility, Dr. Beck proposed this idea of negative triad because he encountered a lot of clients with depression who had persistent negative views about themselves, about other people, and about future in general. So collectively, he called this as negative triad. So in his book, Depression Causes and Treatment, he proposed this new hypothesis of depression based on the idea of negative triad. So his conclusion was that just modifying people's basic beliefs about themselves. If you're looking at their interpretation and their automatic thoughts, tremendously modified psychopathology that they had, and they got better. So this is actually the basic premise of a CBT, that it's not inverted hostility, it's not like other dimensions that are contributing to depression. It's actually mainly the dysfunctional thinking that's found across like all patients with depression. And because they believe that it's actually the thinking that's contributing to maintaining this mental condition, if we can modify the way people think about things, then we can actually improve the symptoms. So that's how it all started. Now CBT is one of the most prevalent psychotherapy interventions. In most agencies that you work as a therapist, you see CBT being delivered. There are all kinds of conditions for which CBT have been shown to be effective. Part of the reason why CBT has become so prevalent is because, first of all, CBT is really effective, and that's no question. I really strongly believe in the positive effects of CBT intervention, but also because CBT tends to be very brief. I mean, compared to psychodynamic oriented approach that was very prevalent at the time. And then because, as you will learn when we talk about CBT principles, CBT is very structured and time limited. And that makes it a lot easier for people to conduct research to show positive effects of CBT. It's easier to get funding. So that's all has contributed to further dissemination of CBT. So right now there are multiple organizations that continue to promote CBT. The Beck Institute, the president of the Beck Institute is Dr. Judith Beck, who is the author of the textbook that we're using for this class. She's also a daughter of Dr. Aaron Beck. So the father and the daughter, they've been working very hard to further disseminate CBT. There's also Academia of Cognitive Therapy, National Association of Cognitive Behavioral Therapists. All those websites are very good resources. They have a lot of tools that clinicians can use, like worksheets, videos, and stuff. So I encourage you to explore those websites, organizational website. So getting a little deeper into CBT. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's a cognitive component as well as a behavioral component. Dr. Beck, because his experience and knowledge in behavior intervention, later he sort of incorporated behavioral components to cognitive therapy. But when he originally developed CBT, the central therapeutic process was really rooted in the cognitive component. So we're gonna look at the definition of cognitive therapy. It is a focused form of psychotherapy based on a model stipulating that psychiatric disorders involve dysfunctional thinking. So as we talked about, as Dr. Beck talked about in his video. And because of that, because CBT advocates believe that mainly it's this thinking dimension that has a central role in maintaining psychiatric conditions, the CBT processes focus on identifying those dysfunctional thinking and modifying those thoughts into more positive way of thinking, which will eventually lead to behavioral changes and improvement in symptoms. Cognitive therapy is defined by a cognitive formulation of the disorder and a cognitive conceptualization of the particular patient. What this means is that there are multiple dimensions that are associated with the manifestation of psychiatric illness. There could be genetic component, there could be behavioral, emotional, social, environmental components. But because CBT focuses on the cognitive dimension of psychiatric condition, when you have a client, you're going to conceptualize this client's case in cognitive terms. We'll actually have an entire class focused on learning about how you conceptualize client's case in cognitive terms. So CBT is rooted in this cognitive model. Basically, your clients come in because they have symptoms, right? So we call it reactions. That could be emotional symptoms, it could be behavioral symptoms, it could be physiological symptoms. It's hard to fall asleep at night. It's hard to breathe in a situation that really provokes anxiety. So all these reactions, people believe that these reactions are actually result from situations, right? You are put into certain kind of situations, and therefore you develop these reactions, right? So clients with limited insights, who don't have a lot of therapy experience, when they feel a certain way, when they act a certain way, they will primarily blame the situations that they are dealing with. But the cognitive model is saying that it's actually not the situations. It's actually what you think about that situation that actually makes you feel a certain way, makes you behave certain ways, and makes you experience some of the physiological responses. Different way of looking at a different way of explaining the cognitive model. There's ABC model by Albert Ellis, who sort of started his own way of cognitive therapy even before Dr. Beck developed CBT. So he explains cognitive model as ABC model, which is very similar to Beck's cognitive model. So there are consequences. So these consequences are actually the reactions. There are physiological consequences, behavioral consequences, emotional consequences. That's C. And people believe that there are activating events that actually cause those consequences, right? That's A. But CBT modality is based on the idea is that it's actually not the events themselves that are causing those consequences. It's actually people's beliefs about those activating events that results in those consequences. So let's think about an example. So there's a triggering event. Your bill goes to collection. People will develop different ways of appraising that situation. You know, there will be some people who think, oh my God, I forgot about this. I guess I'll just have to deal with it. You know, you may be annoyed, frustrated, but you go back and you deal with it. And then there are other kind of people who would actually think, of course, I can never do anything right. If that's how they interpret the situation, what would be their bodily sensations? You have low energy, it's difficult for you to go to sleep at night, and because of that, you know, you're extremely tired. And when people have those physiological symptoms, you're likely to act in certain ways, such as like, I don't want to deal with it. It's too stressful to think about it. So you avoid or withdraw from the situations. So those who have a pattern of thinking, when there's some kind of minor, like annoying things happen, minor crises happen, if you are kind of people who keep thinking, I did that again, there it goes again, that's who I am, then you're actually likely to continue this cycle because you're going to keep avoiding things that you have to face. And then that's going to create a situation that will trigger these chain of responses again. So that's how the cognitive model suggests, that's how the cognitive model explains psychiatric conditions. There is an expanded version of cognitive model. So Ellis' ABC model that we talked about, you know, A, activating events, B, beliefs, and C, consequences. So ABCDEF model is actually explains the whole intervention, the CBT intervention, because we believe that there are some beliefs or thoughts that are associated with certain consequences. We develop techniques, we apply those skills to disrupt those beliefs, those thinking patterns, and that will result in different effects. And as a result, clients will feel different, you know, hopefully feel more positive. So that's the basic concept of the cognitive model. And the CBT is really rooted in this basic understanding of cognitive model of psychiatric illness. So based on this cognitive model, Dr. Judith Beck, her way of kind of summarizing this is that people's reactions always make sense once you understand what they were thinking. And people's emotions are logically associated with the content of their thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? So when you come back next week, when we have our in-person portion of our class, we'll actually do some exercise to help you think a little deeper into this cognitive model. And it's very important for you because CBT is very much rooted in this cognitive model. It's important that you have solid understanding of this model and also can explain that to your clients because your clients might come in, you know, they might have a lot of different types of therapy, you know, a lot of people have received, would have received supportive type of counseling. Um, you know, they need to understand that, you know, the CBT is a very specific form of psychotherapy that has its own theory of change. So, you know, your first several sessions will involve you really like doing psychoeducation, really engaging your client in understanding this cognitive model and explaining the kind of activities and tasks that you're going to be working on together based on this cognitive model. So if you look at this week's class module, there are some resources that I listed. There are some worksheets that you can use when explaining cognitive model to your clients. There is also direction that explains how you would fill out that model. So I encourage you to look at those resources and also try to use that for yourself. As I talked about, that CBT being really like helping or focusing on helping clients to become their own therapists, unless you are able to use those skills for yourself, like it's very difficult for you to help your clients to do that on their own. So that's what we learned today. And the second portion of today's lecture will involve learning about 10 principles of CBT. I forgot to mention that there is another video right underneath this lecture video where you can see experienced CBT therapists engaging clients in understanding cognitive model. So that will be a good example for you to watch. Next time when we come back, you will have a chance to do a role play with your partner to exercise how to explain the cognitive model to your client. So that's it for today.